The idea of this Ambient Afternoon event really came about because of our location. We're in Wimborne Minster, which is a small Dorset town, which is also the birthplace of Robert Fripp, who is one of the inventors of ambient music. So in that sense, Wimborne can claim to be one of the homes of ambient music. So one of the ideas of Ambient Afternoon is to celebrate the legacy of Robert Fripp and to keep alive his spirit of experimentation within the town. We're really lucky here because we've got a really beautiful location, which is the garden of the Museum of East Dorset, right in the middle of the town. And this is a really ancient garden that goes back to Anglo-Saxon times, and it provides just a fantastic place to listen to this kind of music. It's a very beautiful garden, and we have a cafe as well, so people can just come in and chill out and relax while listening to this kind of music. We really wanted to create an event that would appeal to a broad section of people, both including sort of hardcore ambient music fans, but also members of the local community who maybe never listened to ambient music before in their lives. So we really wanted to create a welcoming kind of event where people could just come and relax and enjoy the garden, listen to the birds and the insects, enjoy the flowers, and maybe have a cup of tea and cake. So we offer afternoon tea as part of the event. And having it in the afternoon makes it a bit more appealing to families so we get lots of people bringing young kids in, which is just lovely. I think live events like this are really important to bring the community together, both the people who produce this kind of music and those people who just like listening to it. Although these days a lot of our interactions are online, there's really no substitute for getting people together in a place and to share an experience like listening to ambient music concerts. I think it's really important too to provide a platform for musicians to perform to an audience. And these days there's not huge opportunities to do that for sort of more experimental musicians. I think events like this are really important for building a community, helping people to come together to both create music and listen to music together, and to share an experience. We'd love to create more opportunities for musicians to perform their music live, because it makes a real difference if you're performing in front of an audience. And I think events like this can really help introduce ambient music to a wider group of people and to show them what's so special about it. And I think while people are enjoying the garden and listening to this kind of music, they might also reflect on the links between music and the wider environment. A lot of people don't realise that most physical media, such as CDs and vinyl, are actually made out of plastic. So building up a music collection can actually have quite a negative impact environmentally. So what we've tried to do with Evergreen music is to show in a small way how things might be done a little differently. So in Evergreen music, we're using upcycled cassettes. So these are cassettes that have been used previously, which we then record over with new material. So this is the most environmental benign way of releasing music on physical media that we could think of. But we've developed the label as a sort of experiment to try and find out how to make the whole process of releasing music as environmentally benign as we can. So the whole operation is carbon neutral, and we only use recycled materials such as paper and card. So all the packaging, stickers and mailing envelopes are all made from recycled paper. The artwork we produce ourselves, so they're all hand printed, and that makes each one unique. And again, we try to use inks that are water soluble and therefore have little environmental impact. I think a lot of people in the music industry are now really getting concerned about, for example, the vinyl revival and what this means in terms of carbon emissions. And of course, vinyl production is associated with very toxic chemicals as well. So there is concern within the industry, and there's been some efforts to try and make vinyl that's made out of alternatives to PVC, such as different forms of recycled plastic and plastic substitutes. And we're just beginning to see these same kind of trends occurring within CD manufacture as well. So that's all really positive and exciting, but we're still a long way from a genuinely environmentally sustainable industry. And even if we think of streaming as an alternative to physical media, that's also associated with significant carbon emissions, so none of these approaches are ideal. So we'd love to see physical media that one can actually recycle properly, but in the meantime, upcycled cassettes seem to be the best option.
My name is Pedro Figueiredo. I'm interested in durational listening and small sounds. I write and record ambient music as Stray Wool, and I'm half of Pond, a project with Rosie Carr.
My name is Tom Haynes, and I'm an ecologist and botanist, and I also perform under the name Grasslands.
My name is Tim Cowie. I'm a composer and sound designer based in Southbourne in Dorset. I'm really interested in sonic textures, and ambient music is a great place to explore sort of long evolving landscapes of sound.
I think my instrument really is listening. So as I go about my daily life, it's something that I'm constantly paying attention to, and it's how I perceive most of the world, through listening.
Listening to the environment is fundamental to me. So I'm a professional ecologist and botanist, and I guess if I hadn't drifted into the science of assessing those kind of ecological kind of parameters, I would have probably drifted into exploring acoustics, because there are fundamental kind of connections to the whole thing. So it's really important because it's all about sense of place, and I've always felt like music is very much about sense of place, where something was recorded, how the thematics of song are created in that area, and then you drift further into it to actually then incorporate what the environment itself sounds like and how musical is that. And it's all kind of connected, because I guess a lot of like folk music is equally built around the sounds of the environment. So some of this is a bit cyclical in the first place. But yeah, it's so important, when you actually start deep listening, but if you just, the first time you pick up a field recorder and you put headphones on and you hear the gain on that microphone and you hear crickets for the first time in grass, like it fundamentally changes how you understand the environment.
So listening is an incredibly important part of my practice. Whenever I'm working with sound or music, my ears are my most important tool. And I carry that practice on outside of my work. I'm always listening to the world around me, and trying to listen on another level, on a deeper level, exploring the sounds and focusing in on sounds. I'm fascinated by how our ears work and how we can focus in on tiny details within a soundscape, or we can let the whole soundscape envelop us. So listening is a really important part of everything I do.
I think field recordings have great potential, and listeners certainly connect deeply with a place if they can listen to it. I think smell and sound are the great senses when it comes to transporting you to another time or location. And field recordings, no matter how processed they are, as long as there's a glimmer of the original location, our brains are pattern matching machines, and I believe field recordings will certainly help with that connection.
So much is happening in the environment sonically that you don't immediately hear until, in some ways, you're ready to hear it and you've been able to focus on it. But one way of, beyond, say, meditative practice and stuff and focusing, is using field recorders, because then the gain stage on those microphones and the sensitivity of them allows the listener to kind of hear so many things that you wouldn't typically be able to immediately hear with your ears, but afterwards you can, for the most part, because then you're tuned into it. Because humans, we're very much about picking out kind of silhouettes. That's kind of how our like hunter-gatherer kind of like mindsets kind of function, is that we're looking for a pattern. Once we've identified the shape of a pattern, we can then explore it further, So field recording fundamentally helps with that, because you can have been in a place, recorded a sound, very easily heard that sound from the microphones, and then also observed what was creating that sound. And then by the time you're kind of fixed into that, then your ears will start picking up things like that, and equally start separating out things that they haven't heard before, like how echoes kind of bounce off different things, how sounds sound different dependent on cloud cover and things like that. And so yeah, there's also kind of like a white noise kind of element to this, where it kind of relaxes the mind, because you're also hearing so many things. And another thing that's actually quite important about field recording is actually how much human noise is within the natural environment that we don't necessarily realise until we start exploring these field recording processes. And then you become a bit of an advocate for kind of raising awareness about human noise, because you then see how that also impacts the rest of the environment and wildlife, because they're also trying to compete with it, bird songs getting louder and things like that, or changing their tones as time goes by to compete with other sounds. So yeah, really important. It's really important from a kind of supporting how ecosystems function kind of aspect, and also from a kind of deeper understanding of kind of a human connection with the environment.
I think field recordings can really connect us with an environment more deeply. I think they reveal the sonic landscape of a place in more detail often than when we are just within that environment. I think when I'm out field recording and I put my headphones on, it really focuses the brain on the sound that you're capturing, and you have the same experience when you're listening back to a recording. And sound is a very powerful sort of memory connector. It can place us in a space that we've been to, or trigger memories and emotions. So I think it can really kind of help people connect to an environment. I think it's also very interesting how it's actually really difficult to capture just the natural world. I do a lot of field recording out in the New Forest, and it's almost impossible not to have the hum of a road in the background, or some kind of human made sound happening at some level within your recording, which I think is very telling of how precious these kind of natural spaces are, where you can, if you can get away from the urban sounds of the human environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think playing in a beautiful garden like this, or in a dark basement in London, or anywhere really, or in a noisy bar, makes all the difference. It's so much nicer to be outside and having the smells of the garden and the sound of the brook and just fresh air makes a lot of difference to how I perceive the act that I'm doing, and I believe and I hope that gets reflected on the performance, and that the audience benefit from that. At least they're benefiting from the fresh air anyway, so I think that's good.
Within a lot of my ambient performances, the environment in which I am playing in totally plays a fundamental part in how that performance is undertaken. So in my ambient kind of habitat performances, the whole function of them is to hear those field recordings, hear the wind, hear the vegetation and the insects flying over the microphones, the bicycles kind of going past, occasionally people moving past, and then trying to move in flow with all of that and where the music should sit within that and not necessarily overpower the environment, be part of that environment. And it's a very meditative process. Ironically, it can also be quite stressful as you're setting all of this up, but it really helps you understand that environment and actually puts you in a frame to move at a speed quite different to how you might kind of play, say, on a record or something like that. And yeah, it is really important, and you can actually take that into an ambient live performance space in a similar manner. Of it's kind of a variant of vibing with a crowd, because you can kind of do that, but you can also vibe with an area, with a venue, with the creaks on the floor, and you can kind of work out from that how loud something should be, how quiet something should be, what tone something should be, and yeah, and it really helps for kind of like active listening.
I think the environment of a performance space definitely influences how I play my ambient music, how I perform. The pieces I played today are, whilst there's a structure and a kind of some of it's predetermined. It's still very kind of improvisational. What actually happens in the moment is I'm reacting to the things that I've already played, but also I'm reacting to the audience and the sound within the room. I think it also, the environment of the performance space certainly influences how you listen to a performance, maybe more so. And today was a great example of that, where there was some church bells happening. The door was open, and during one of the performances you could hear the sounds of the church bells ringing out. And I was sitting by the door, and there's a water feature right there with running water, and I had a very beautiful moment where the music and there was sort of field recordings coming from the performance inside, and I had this sort of filling out of the soundscape with this running water behind me, and the church bells happening at the same time. It's very incredibly immersive experience.
I think independent labels are crucial within the ambient music scene, especially when so much of the mediation today happens through algorithms. And it's really nice to know that there was someone who listened to an album and thought, I might know a couple of people who like this, and then they go and they release it on their label, and it's sort of like when you had a friend who just wanted to share a new tape with you back in the day. Equally, the communities play a very similar role. Once you find your people, you get recommendations from real humans and not from an algorithm. On the creative side of things, it's super important to have a network of peers who you can rely on to help with feedback or even writing or recording, and also just having someone to chat with. Creating can be such a solitary endeavor. Being part of a community is quite important, I think.
Independent labels and grassroots communities within ambient music is so important. The community kind of aspects, you know, it's very much around articulating ideas and meeting kind of people, and you know that we're such a friendly community, and I do feel that ambient music's kind of going through a bit of a resurgence right now. I felt like it was on a bit of a build in 2019, and then COVID slowed everything down, and you know, I feel like it's kind of coming back into place again. And intrinsically, you know, you're in a position, say as a performer, where you can express things in a musical kind of context, live or via a recording, and people will vibe with that. And as you kind of then keep the communication going, you kind of find out that, you know, these people could be friends. You know, you understand each other on different things because that's where your communication started. And it's so important because as you kind of drift into your middle age and stuff as well, you know, like the opportunities coming out of education to socialise and meet people, it's pretty restricted, you know. Like we hear about this isolation epidemic that we're all kind of facing with the kind of internet works, but this is kind of like a different kind of aspect of that allows the building of kind of friendships and meaningful interactions, you know, either emotive from the music that you hear in the recordings and seeing the artistry that goes into it, or actually go into the performances and then being able to not only listen but then engage with people about how they've done that music, how it made them feel. And you know, that's fantastic, you know. And then they can kind of move into the ambient kind of record labels to kind of see what people have been doing and what other people are kind of doing in that space. And you know, it's really important, and there's so few as well that, you know, it's really important to keep it all kind of supported and keep kind of like buying those records and stuff, really, because you know it's difficult for musicians out there, so it's good to just keep supporting it.
I think events like this are incredibly important. I think this kind of music doesn't sit so naturally in the usual live music venues, so having these kind of events which are dedicated to ambient music, which require a slightly different listening environment, are essential to allow musicians to perform their music and the community to get together and listen to the music properly. And as we've seen today, there's a thriving community of musicians, and as well as an audience who want to hear this kind of music.